I'm here today with Lauren Hunter. Lauren is the author of a new book titled Write Your Journey, a step-by-step guide to write your life story fast. Lauren is a writer who loves exploring the big picture of the journey we're all on together. Her career spans more than 2 decades in public relations, content marketing, freelance writing, and publishing. She's married to her high school sweetheart, and they live in Northern California with their 4 children. She can be found online at laurenhunter.net. So Lauren, it's really a pleasure to speak with you again, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on your podcast video. Thank you, Brian. It's awesome. I know you're everywhere online providing resources for authors. It's really wonderful, all the resources you provide. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. And thanks, for joining me to talk about your new book, because I think it's particularly relevant for, the Writing for Your Life and Publishing in Color audiences, because it's about writing.
Yeah.
So congratulations on doing that book.
Thank you.
Glad for you. But before we get into that, maybe you could tell folks that aren't familiar with you a little bit more about your background, because you've got a interesting, eclectic background.
Interesting, eclectic. I often struggle with how many things to put in my bio. So one of those people that, not jack of all trades, but I'm a musician in addition to being a writer. I've done worship leading at church for like 20 years, play the piano, sing and write music. I have a bunch of kids, so like I can rock the mom thing pretty well. Just sent our first one off to college, so and then down to 12. So we're doing middle school transitions on top of college transitions. So I built my career on an English degree from San Jose State University quite a while ago, and got right into public relations in Silicon Valley in the .com era of late 90s. And so I kind of approached that with a little bit different point of view. I don't love the business of marketing and PR, but I understand it and was able to I think us writers, we know how to get inside somebody else's voice. And so often I had to get inside of a CEO's voice to write quotes on their behalf, write endorsements and write press releases and all kinds of things like that. So I was just excited that I got into a career in a field where I could use writing professionally and make pretty good money. And then always wrote for myself, wrote personal essays and started a blog years ago. And then I went out on my own and I kind of combined my Christian testimony with the same industry I was in, technology, and kind of parlayed that and started a blog for pastors that got pretty big and ran that. And so then I got to work with editors. I was the editor and work with writers, guest writers about church tech and pastors and all kinds of people like that. So it's really fun to be able to do that. And I sold that business earlier this year. And launched my first book, which was called Leaving Christian Science, 10 Stories of New Faith in Jesus Christ, which you interviewed me last year, almost a year ago, about that book. And so I really kind of overlapped, kicking off my author career with tapering off of my editing kind of business work on my blog. And I had kind of stopped consulting because I got worn out. As you know, when you do a lot of different things, you can't do all of them well. And so something about hitting 40, it's okay, and that was even a few years back. So I just felt like I really needed to get after this author thing if I was going to try to do it. So kids, music, words, all those good things. So I just really enjoy all of that. And I really love the conversation around, writing and authoring and all that good stuff. So that's kind of where I come from.
Well, I'm glad you've made the transitions that you have. And, you've obviously done really well in a lot of different areas, which is always impressive to see in people. And coming from the high tech space myself, I can certainly relate to, the role that you played there.
Yeah, definitely fun and lots of excitement. The book that I'm launching now, Write Your Journey, it was sort of birthed out of the first book, which was 10 stories. So it's my story of leaving the religious cult of Christian Science, which, it's a really small group. It's not Scientology. It's a different group called Christian Science. And so after I was done with that book and after I was promoting it and doing all the PR on, that book and podcasts and all that kind of stuff, which is really it's a totally different animal, right, to write a book and then to talk about your book and have conversations. So I leaned on a lot of that PR background for my own book PR. But when I was that was all tapering off last summer, I was like, I don't know. Do you ever experience this where the ideas just kind of like drop on your shoulder and you're like, huh, that's a really cool idea?
Oh, all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
the bad news for me is that I've got a whole list of things that I would like to launch and start that I know that I can't because I'm already, up to my
Yeah.
max capacity with what I've already committed.
Right. Right. So, so that kind of happened, and I actually was in the middle of putting together a book of poetry and essays that I've been writing poetry forever, and so that was going to be next on the list. But this idea kind of dropped on my shoulder, and I thought, oh, this is like immediately I sat down and started outlining. My tagline, like my author tagline, is "Journey Together." So it's kind of this, like you read my bio, like the big picture of this journey that we're on together, whether you're a person of faith or you're seeking some kind of faith or spiritual connection. I really like look for the threads and the similarities in there and try to press in on those things. And that's what I love to do. And so this Write Your Journey is like using the word journey from my author tagline, Journey Together. And then the outline kind of takes you through, here, I'm going to read it, journey to your past. So I take people through their past and have graphics in the book, and they're also available on my website. I snuck in a couple poems into the book because I write about time a lot, and this book is really encouraging people to look back at their past and look for threads, look for themes. So a lot of times, you'll say write your life story, and there's a couple of really awesome books out there that I bought and researched before writing this book. And so it's not meant to be like a comprehensive guide to writing birth to death. That's not what my book is. There are other good books out there that do that kind of thing, but mine, I have graphics in here to kind of go through your timeline and kind of loosely chart the events of your life to look at your past. And then there's like steps. So obviously step-by-step guide. It really walks you through like the practical steps to looking at your past and then looking for themes and then going back through your timeline. And then I kind of talk about like what are some life themes because, nobody's fresh from their English program or has been through 7th grade English where they teach you how to write a narrative essay. My 7th grade daughter was like, Mom, we're writing a narrative essay. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're doing the same thing my book is doing. You get to do this in class. And so we go through themes and look at those, and we talk about writing with your unique voice and what kind of defines. Now, again, this is not, it's not meant to be like a comprehensive guide on writer's voice, which is a huge topic, and a lot of people have written boatloads on that topic, but it's enough to kind of get the non-writer thinking about, okay, how, you want to write a personal story like you speak. If you have an accent or if you use a colloquialism, like those are the things that kind of make you stand out as you. And so when someone reads your story, it would be great if it actually sounded like you. If I know you, it should sound kind of like you. And so going through that and then taking them right through their story structure, and that's where I look at narrative arc, the 3 arc narrative elements of the story, and I have like some graphics in there. So it's really meant for someone who maybe doesn't have a background in literature or writing, so that they can write a narrow slice of their story. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. It sounds like the book is focused a lot on kind of the upfront, early stage process of writing, or to kind of developing a book and a concept and things like that, and not as much about the craft of nitty gritty craft of writing, or about the launch of the book after you've written it.
No, yeah, there's only so the structure is chapter 4. Chapter 5 is the composition, and so I go through the composition and what that should look like, and then the editing process. I kind of talk about that, but again, it's meant for someone that wants to write about their career story, or maybe they're recently retired and someone's asked them, hey, can you do a write-up on your career, And so then you can look, and I have examples like from my own life on the timeline side of things. And then kind of walking them through what that looks like, what the theme looks like, what the story structure would look like, a beginning, a middle, an end, an inciting incident, in the beginning, and kind of just lightly, like not overburdening them with real detailed narrative fiction or narrative nonfiction structure, but giving them enough that they can kind of sink their teeth and go, okay, now it's not so overwhelming. I'm not writing my whole life story from the day I was born till now. But I'm writing about my marriage and how, I never thought that I would get married. And I was in my I'm just speaking, actually my critique partner has a similar story to that. She was single. She, had this journey, and then something happened that changed her. And then she met this person, and then, now she's happily married. So a story like that, where there's a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's like a life takeaway, like a theme takeaway, because we can all relate to one another's themes. We can all relate to one another's journeys. And so that's where the whole write your journey, is you want to connect to my story. I want to connect to your story. That's how we live and learn and thrive and grow from one another. So that's what I'm passionate about.
Within your book, you advocate something that I do as well, which is rather than writing a memoir, which many people seem to want to do, writers instead should consider selecting a theme and then weaving their own story into that theme. Is that the way that you think of it as well?
Yeah. And so I did this. This is, again, inspired from the first book, which are these testimonies of people who left a religious cult and found Jesus Christ as Lord, like, evangelical kind of Christianity. And so I don't know about you, but if you interview somebody about their faith story, like, it's just second nature to I had these interviews that went on for an hour and a half. Wow. And I would transcribe them, and then I would be trying to find a theme, because the book has 10 different themes for 10 different stories. So each person's story focuses on a different theological theme. And so that's where the idea came out, is it's not just, here's my story and it's going on. And then, each story had, a beginning, some kind of incident, which was like, how did you start doubting this faith that you were brought up in? And then, their particular experience with that, and then their life experience. And then how did they start hearing about, biblical Christianity? What triggered them? Who spoke to them? Was there conversation? Was there, a bathroom floor moment? Like what was happening? And so that's where the inspiration came, is I feel like it's easier for the mind to wrap around a theme than it is like just a big vacuous story that goes on and on and on, and we don't quite know what the point is.
So since you did the earlier book, and that's, you're further along, I guess I would say, in the marketing of that book than you are in the new one. What were the things that you learned that you think people could really utilize the most out of your learning of how to market that first book?
That's a good question. The first book, I think because it was my first book as an author, and then it was a really personal book, because even though it's been 20 years since I left the faith of Christian Science, there's a lot of trauma and damage from growing up in something like that. And so I was like re-traumatized by putting the book out there, and it was like coming out of the religious cult closet. And wow. So that was like, it added a more difficult layer. It wasn't just a book about a topic like this one is. So I don't know, this time around, I'm learning very well that the end of November, middle to end of November, is a horrible time to launch a book, which I had read and knew, but
there's plenty of other times that are bad too. I mean, like, you don't want to do it in December.
Right.
You typically don't want to do it in the summer, right? I mean,
fall. So the previous book was September. Actually the 21st of September, I think. And that was fine. It was far enough from the holidays that people weren't thinking about their Thanksgiving plans. And I built a launch team, and I had, the book has almost 40 reviews now, which is great. it hit like 20 reviews, and then I would be like begging, not begging, but hey, do you think maybe you could post a review? So this time around, I have a launch team, but again, it's Christmas, so it's like kind of a bad time. So I'm kind of letting them off the hook a little bit until after Christmas, and then we'll put like a Zoom together for people to talk about the book or talk about their stories. I think people with a writing book, I had several people, including my mother-in-law, say, "Oh, I don't have time to write my book right now." And I was like, "Oh, you don't have to write your story immediately, but I need help with, I just want you to give me some feedback and an Amazon review." Yeah, so I had to clarify that. For a few people, but it's a long game. It's not a short game.
Absolutely.
So and I'd love to interview other authors like that are far down the road from me to hear from them. Like, do you continue marketing your first and second and third book when you're doing your fourth book? Like, do you go back? Do you write about those topics? Do you still try to get on podcasts for those previous books? I mean, I think everything helps with your sales. It's difficult, I will say, as a new author. There's a lot of pressure to like pick one lane and stay in that one lane. And as you heard from my opening, like I obviously have a lot of lanes. And so, there is that option of like a pen name if I were to start writing fiction and that kind of thing. But I also don't like following rules. And I'm like kind of a fierce, independent kind of person. And so I just feel like I want to publish what I want to publish, and I don't always listen to the sage advice like I should. So I'm just going to keep on marketing and advertising, or not. I do run Amazon ads on Leaving Christian Science, and then I'm getting some started with Write Your Journey. I bought an Amazon ad school with Brian Cohen, been following him for a while, and so follow his technique for Amazon ads, which has really helped. So just trying to get, the sales up and keep the marketing going. And it's hard to talk about yourself. It's hard to post on social media, and you don't want to talk to people about your book all the time. Like it really needs to be like 15, 20% of the time. And the other
Absolutely.
75 to 80, you're just being a person connecting with people. And so that's a tough thing. And I know probably every author struggles with that. So maybe
Absolutely.
that's a longer discussion. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, it's a couple of different things that you talked about, people struggle with. One is the whole self-promotion thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, if you think of book marketing as self-promotion, it's very counter to what Christ told us to do, right?
Right.
So,
right.
But there are ways around that mindset. I mean, if you really believe that you wrote your book to serve other people, then marketing is really just a process of letting people know how you can help them.
Right.
Right. It's not about you.
Definitely.
As the author. It's about, I'm trying to help you in this area, and hopefully this is something that you can take advantage of, right? So that's a completely different mindset. But then the other thing is just, well, how do you build awareness, right? In today's world where everyone is trying to build awareness, whether it's through social media or any other means you can think of, right? It's a very noisy environment, and it's really, really difficult to rise above the noise for anyone. Yeah. And it's getting tougher. My experience, tougher every month.
Absolutely. I don't know if anyone's been on a publisher's email list, but I was on several. I tend to unsubscribe from a lot. Like I'll subscribe and then get a few emails and I'm like, whoa, 5 emails in a week. Like I can't handle that. But I was on, I think it was with and Stock, because I have 2 books for review. I do reviews on my website, and then I have we all have writer friends who are pushing books out. And so if you want them to be on your launch team, then you kind of also need to be on their launch team. So I just helped another author, Carrie Wyatt Kent, is a wonderful faith writer who has probably a dozen books, and she just did an Advent devotional, and she lovingly, actually her quote is on the back. Her quote is on the back. I got a blurb from her on the back. And so she had an Advent book coming out. So just today posting a review on her book. So that kind of thing. So I think I got the email from Whippenstock with their new releases, and it was like scroll, scroll, scroll. This email with like 3 or 4 books across. So there were at least 100 books in the
Oh
email they sent
my.
out. I was like,
Oh my.
whoa! Like I know
Goodness
you have a lot
sakes.
of books, but that's like so many. So it's easy to feel overwhelmed. And if
Yes.
you're, I'm a highly sensitive person. I don't know if you know that term, but many of us writers are very intuitive or empathic or sensitive, whatever you want to call it. So we can get quickly overwhelmed by too much information. And that is true of social media as well. And so that can also be an added layer of difficulty with promoting yourself as you get on there and you see other people doing the same thing, or you see authors doing it in a way that you don't approve of, and you just say, I don't want anything to do with that. So that is hard. I do work, I haven't worked with an author yet other than myself, but I do a lot of nonprofit coaching on social media. There's several organizations where you can volunteer to do like social media and marketing phone calls. And so that's been really interesting working with nonprofits because they don't have a budget at all. And they often don't have a lot of savvy marketing skills. And so being able to come in and kind of utilize that in a comfortable way for them. It's helped really as I'm thinking about my own marketing. My tendency professionally is to hit all of the networks, like don't leave anyone out. It's Instagram, it's Twitter, it's Pinterest, it's, blah, 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 on and on. And there's like a new one every other day, it feels like. But for limited resources and limited budget, you really don't want to do that. And so,
It's better for most anybody to focus, and do a
yeah,
couple of them really well and forget
yeah.
the rest.
Unless you have wicked good software, like I use this software called CoSchedule, and it allows you to customize and pre-schedule all your messages. So then you can it's sort of a cheat or a hack because you can take the time to go through and edit and write and be sincere and be in the moment, and then it sends it out for you and makes you look way more awesome than you actually are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So what about going forward? I mean, are there any
Yeah.
new book projects that you can talk about yet?
Yeah. I was in the middle of pulling together a book of poetry and essays. I have a lot of personal kind of narrative essays on my website, and then just topical poetry. So I'm still kind of in the phase of I've edited all my poems. I've edited the essays that I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to put like one big book together or if I'm going to break it up and into marketable smaller books, which would be like, poetry is not super sexy. It doesn't sell real great. And so I'm trying to look to modern poets who are killing it, like Rupi Kaur. And I'm like, okay, what can I do? Like I walk into a gift shop and there's her poetry book. Like, what is she doing that I need to know how to do? So yeah, it would be fun. It would be fun to be able to find success in that area. And it still falls in line with my author, ethos, if you will, of Journey Together. Because that's what poetry, kind of good poetry, it joins us together and unifies us in some common experience or vision. And that's what's inspiring and exciting to me.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad to see that you already have the ball rolling on, a couple of different directions. So that's great to hear. And you'll have to let me know when you have something else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are 2 poems in Write Your Journey. As I was editing my poetry work for this upcoming book, I was like, dang, I write about time a lot. Like, why do I write about time so much? So, it's really interesting as you, for those of you who maybe are watching this and you haven't published your own book yet, it's cool to like write a lot and like let it marinate, let it sit and come back to it. At a later date, you might find insights about yourself and spark a new idea of how you want to put something together or how you might market it or share with someone and they might have ideas. But yeah, I feel like I'm constantly learning how to be a better writer, how to express myself better, and then how to help others like through that process. So,
Good.
yeah.
Well, as I mentioned before, you can find out more about Lauren at laurenhunter.net.
Yep.
And Lauren, congratulations again on your new book, and hope it goes very well for you.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.